"Get out of my lobby, this place isn't for your kind." The words sliced through the air like a whip crack. They didn't slip from Richard Walker's mouth as a careless mistake. No. They came out deliberate, loud enough for every guest in the marble-floored lobby of the Horizon Grand Hotel in downtown Seattle to hear. His face, flushed with disdain, was twisted into a sneer as he stood behind the gleaming reception desk, arms crossed like a judge issuing a sentence. His voice echoed under the crystal chandeliers as every pair of eyes turned toward Naomi Brooks, a black woman in plain black t-shirt, fitted jeans and quiet sneakers. No jewelry, no luxury handbag, no entourage. Just calm, steady eyes. And yet Richard saw none of that calm as worthy. To him, Naomi was out of place, unfit, undeserving. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't hesitate. He wanted witnesses. In that humiliating instant, Naomi felt the familiar ache of recognition, the sting she had long ago learned to mask behind an unbreakable composure. But Richard didn't know. No one in that lobby did. In exactly 9 minutes, Naomi Brooks would fire him. She would strip him and every staff member who had stood complicit beside him of their authority, of their access, and of the power they had abused. She would dismantle their control right here in this very lobby, on this marble floor they believed she didn't deserve to walk on. But at that moment, Richard still believed he had won. "Security!" barked Amanda Blake, a tight-lipped assistant manager, stepping beside him with a smug smile. She pressed a hidden button behind the desk. "We may have an unauthorized guest attempting to access a premium suite, possibly fraudulent." Brian Cooper, another clerk, folded his arms and leaned forward with narrowed eyes, already playing his role. "Penthouse reservation," he scoffed. "Are you sure you're in the right hotel, ma'am?" Naomi kept her voice measured, almost gentle. "The name is Brooks, Naomi Brooks. I have a reservation for the penthouse suite." She slid her ID and her black credit card across the polished counter, smooth, silent, without anger. But every motion was being watched, by staff, by other guests, and by a young woman with a phone half raised. Emily Turner, a travel blogger from San Francisco, whispering urgently to her friend David Harper. "I'm filming this," Emily hissed. "People need to see this." David nodded, pulling out his phone to begin a live stream. "We're at the Horizon Grand Hotel in Seattle," he narrated. "And this is happening right now, in front of everyone." Behind the desk, Richard picked up Naomi's card between two fingers, holding it as though it might stain him. "Strange," he muttered, loudly enough for all to hear. "This looks suspicious." His performance continued, feeding off the silence around him. Lauren's smirk widened. Brian tapped the desk twice, signaling security, and Richard leaned in close. "We've seen this scam before," he sneered. "People come in, flash a fancy card, claim a reservation, and vanish when we verify with the bank. Well, not today." He handed Naomi's card to Brian. "Lock it up." Brian obeyed instantly, almost gleefully. He walked to the brushed steel safe set into the wall behind the counter, opened it with exaggerated ceremony, and placed Naomi's black card inside before slamming the door shut with a final, hollow thud. "You're done here," Brian said, triumphant. The air tightened. Emily's voice broke the silence. "They just took her card. That's theft." David's live stream numbers ticked upward, hundreds watching, then thousands. Naomi didn't flinch. Her fingers did not tremble. Her voice, when it came, was calm, level, and deadly quiet. "You're going to regret this." But Richard wasn't finished. He leaned forward again, voice dripping with contempt. "Your reservation's canceled. You're holding up real guests, people who belong here." Naomi tilted her head slightly and gestured gently toward the surrounding crowd. Phones lifted, eyes wide, conversations frozen. You mean the ones watching this right now? Every word she spoke was like a stone thrown into the still water of the lobby's atmosphere, small ripples growing larger. Amanda Blake stepped forward now, blazer sharp, smile sharper. "You need to leave, now," she ordered, "or we'll call the authorities." Naomi met her gaze, unwavering. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. Amanda didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. Leave, or we escalate this. We're done talking." Richard crossed his arms again, smiling a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He believed this moment belonged to him. He believed his power was absolute. But the storm he had invited was only just beginning to gather. Naomi tapped her phone once, lifting it gently to her ear. "Grace," she said calmly to her assistant on the other end. "It's happening." And with those quiet words, heard by no one but herself, the balance of power began to shift. The clock was ticking, 9 minutes. Everything would change. Long before Naomi Brooks stood, calm and unshaken, in the marble lobby of the Horizon Grand, she had stood in countless other lobbies. But in those lobbies, she was younger, invisible, and alone. At 16, Naomi waited patiently inside the grand lobby of the Paramount Hotel in Charlotte, dressed in her neat Sunday best. Her parents were late to pick her up from a youth leadership seminar, so she sat quietly on a velvet armchair near the window, clutching a worn book. A clerk, a middle-aged white woman in a stiff gray blazer, approached, eyeing Naomi from head to toe. Without a smile, without a hint of warmth, she delivered the words Naomi would never forget. "This lounge is for guests only. You'll need to wait outside." Naomi had tried to explain she was simply waiting, she wasn't loitering. But the woman didn't listen. Security was summoned. She was escorted, gently but firmly, to the sidewalk. It wasn't just a moment, it became a lesson. At 24, Naomi was a junior consultant, exhausted after a red-eye flight from New York to Atlanta, dragging her carry-on straight to a boutique hotel with a confirmed reservation. She wore sweatpants and sneakers, her blazer tucked under her arm. The man behind the desk didn't even glance at her confirmation. "You don't look like someone who'd stay here," he said flatly. "System's down. Come back when the manager's around." That night, Naomi slept in her rental car, parked in the hotel's lot, cold, humiliated, alone. And yet it wasn't despair that took root that night. It was resolve. She pulled out a notebook, flipped to an empty page, and began outlining her vision. One that would redefine what hospitality meant. A business plan, scribbled by hand under the dim glow of a dashboard light, that would one day evolve into Brooks International Hospitality Group. An empire of inclusion, precision, and respect. The car was where her company was born. And then there was Los Angeles, age 29. A tailored navy pantsuit, hair neatly tied, confident but weary after a full day of meetings. The hotel lobby gleamed with polished brass and hushed opulence. Naomi approached the front desk, handed over her reservation details, her ID, and her corporate credit card. Platinum, embossed, unmistakable. The man behind the counter took her ID, scrutinized it, then looked up at her, then down at the card again. "This can't be you," he muttered. "We'll need a second form of ID." Naomi provided it, then another. Still, they made her wait. 2 hours in the lobby, watching white guests in designer suits check into suites and penthouses without showing anything beyond a name. It was that experience that shaped one of Brooks International's founding policies. Zero tolerance for guest profiling. No discretion allowed in customer dignity. Every guest is welcome, every time, no exceptions. Her entire company had been built on that core value. And now, standing here in her own hotel, the Horizon Grand, a flagship property under her brand, Naomi felt history trying to repeat itself one more time. Richard Walker didn't recognize her name. Amanda Blake didn't recognize her authority. Ryan Cooper didn't recognize her face. But Naomi didn't need them to recognize her to understand exactly what they were doing. She had lived through this before. Humiliation disguised as policy. Exclusion disguised as protocol. As Amanda's voice rang out over the intercom for security and as Richard locked her credit card in the brushed steel safe, Naomi was not merely a guest who'd been mistreated. She was a woman whose entire life had been shaped by moments like these. Moments that hardened her spirit but sharpened her purpose. Moments that ensured that this time, today, would be different. Behind her composed exterior was the memory of that 16-year-old girl escorted to a sidewalk, of that exhausted consultant sleeping in her rental car, of that accomplished professional forced to wait under the scrutiny of unjust suspicion. All of them lived inside her still, but Naomi was not 16 anymore. She was 37, the founder and CEO of Brooks International Hospitality Group and owner of this very hotel. And in 9 minutes, the balance of power would flip, quietly, decisively, and irreversibly. Guests watched, their unease growing. Emily Turner and David Harper continued streaming, their follower counts climbing into the thousands. Naomi lifted her phone gently to her ear again. "Grace," she whispered to her executive assistant, "log every second, from this moment forward." On the other end of the line, Grace Lewis's voice was cool and sharp. "Already recording, audit file initiated, systems ready." In her mind, Naomi could already see the end of this confrontation, not as an angry spectacle, but as a turning point, a reckoning. And it would begin exactly when Naomi chose. Ryan Cooper stepped away from the counter, gripping the brushed steel safe key like it was a prize. His smirk deepened as he turned back toward Naomi Brooks, savoring every second of what he thought was his authority. "Your card is now company property," he declared loudly, holding the key up so that everyone could see it. "Until the bank verifies it, you're not getting it back." He slammed the safe door shut with a theatrical flourish, the cold click of its lock echoing ominously across the polished marble floor. Naomi didn't move. Her face was unreadable, calm, a surface that hid a storm gathering just beneath. But around her, the tension in the lobby began to tighten. Guests froze in place, some whispering to each other, others watching with growing discomfort. A few lifted their phones higher, cameras catching every frame. David Harper's live stream continued to climb in viewership, hundreds turning into thousands. Comments streamed across the screen in a furious tide. "Let us that. Why isn't anyone stopping this? Unbelievable, this is a luxury hotel?" Emily Turner zoomed in, catching every nuance. Naomi's serene composure contrasted with the sneering confidence on Richard Walker's face. "Walk out now," Richard barked at Naomi, voice sharp, cutting through the murmurs. "You're wasting everyone's time. You don't belong here." Amanda Blake, emboldened by her manager's cruelty, rounded the front desk and took a step toward Naomi. "Time's up," she snapped, reaching out and grabbing Naomi's arm. Her fingers barely touched Naomi's sleeve when the entire lobby seemed to gasp in unison. Emily's voice rang out immediately. She just grabbed her. Her phone camera swung closer, capturing Amanda's hand on Naomi's arm in real time. The clip was uploaded within seconds. The comments exploded. "She put hands on her. Assault, right there, caught on camera." Even some guests began murmuring aloud now, no longer hiding their reactions. Near the concierge desk, Isabel Ortiz, the youngest member of the hotel staff, froze. Her heart raced as she watched the scene unfold. She had seen Naomi's name in the reservation system earlier that morning. Naomi Brooks, penthouse suite, owner override status, but fear had kept her silent. Until now, Something inside Isabel snapped. Her voice, though shaking, rang out clear across the marble expanse. "You can't put your hands on a guest. Her reservation is valid." The words hung in the air like a stone dropped in a still pond. Richard's head whipped toward Isabel, eyes narrowing into slits. "And one more word," he hissed, "and you're gone too." But Isabel didn't back down. She took one deliberate step forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Naomi. "I won't lie for you," she said firmly. Naomi's gaze flicked toward Isabel, her calm breaking just slightly at the edges, softening into a subtle nod of acknowledgement. Across the room, a woman with silver hair lifted her phone just a little higher and whispered to no one in particular, "I can't believe what I'm seeing." A man in a navy blazer leaned toward David's camera, voice grave. "You getting all this?" David nodded. "Every second." Amanda recoiled, stung by Isabel's defiance, but Richard surged forward again, desperate to reassert control. "She's a fraud," he snapped. "People like her always try to play the system." His voice dropped lower, but the venom was unmistakable. "You all know what I mean." Naomi raised her chin slightly, meeting Richard's glare directly. "Finish that sentence," she said quietly, her voice still steady. "Go on." But Richard couldn't. The words died in his throat as he realized, too late, that the crowd around them wasn't simply watching anymore. They were judging, recording, remembering. Naomi took a step forward, her presence filling the space between them without raising her voice. "You've just made the worst mistake of your professional life," she said. Richard let out a short, bitter laugh. "You think so?" "I know so." Even as the air in the lobby tightened further, Naomi lifted her phone again, a simple, practiced gesture. "Grace," she said quietly, but clearly enough that a few guests nearby could hear, "begin logging every word from this point forward. Timestamp the video feeds." Grace Lewis's voice came through her earpiece, crisp and unwavering. "Understood. Audit initiated." Brian Cooper, standing smug behind the desk, chimed in now, louder than before, as if volume might disguise his insecurity. "You're a fraud, lady," he sneered. "You think a card gets you in here? Go back to wherever you came from." A low murmur rippled through the gathered crowd. Disgust, disbelief, and something else now. Anger. Isabel Ortiz stepped fully out from behind her concierge station, standing next to Naomi, her voice stronger than before. "I've worked here 3 years," she said to no one and everyone at once, "and I've seen this pattern over and over. A guest like her walks in, alone, confident, dressed down, and you treat them like a threat." Richard turned to Isabel, eyes burning. "That's enough." But Isabel continued, her words slicing through the rising noise. "And when anyone questions it, you say it's policy, but it's not policy. It's you." Her statement landed like a thunderclap. David Harper turned his camera toward his own face, speaking directly to his swelling online audience. "Just to be clear," he said, "we're watching a paying guest get harassed after providing her name, ID, and card. This isn't about security, this isn't about fraud, this is about bias, and it's on full display." In the center of it all, Naomi Brooks remained motionless. But inside, her pulse was steady, her mind sharp, her plan advancing exactly as intended. The reckoning had begun, and she would give them no excuse, no out, and no mercy. Isabel Ortiz's words, "It's not policy, it's you," still hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The atmosphere inside the Horizon Grand's lobby shifted. The marble floors and crystal chandeliers no longer reflected the serene luxury they were designed to evoke. Instead, they mirrored the rising storm of public indignation. For the first time, Richard Walker's mask of confidence cracked. His eyes darted between Isabel, Naomi, and the gathering crowd. He could feel it now. Control slipping from his fingers like water through a sieve. Across the lobby, Emily Turner whispered to David Harper, "They're turning. The crowd's turning." David nodded, never taking his eyes off his screen. This is what it looks like when people stop pretending they don't see. A guest near the bar, a silver-haired woman with an elegant floral scarf, stepped forward deliberately. Her voice was quiet, but carried authority. "You're not putting your hands on her again," she said firmly, positioning herself between Naomi and Amanda Blake. Amanda froze, her mouth slightly open in disbelief. Then another guest, a young father holding his toddler, rolled his carry-on suitcase directly into Amanda's path, blocking her movement without saying a word. One by one, other guests began to shift their positions, subtly at first, but then unmistakably deliberate. They were forming a boundary. A loose semicircle around Naomi Brooks and Isabel Ortiz. It wasn't coordinated, but it was collective, an instinctual act of solidarity. In this moment, Richard Walker finally saw what was happening. His power wasn't being taken from him by force, it was dissolving under the sheer will of those he had disregarded. And yet, pride would not let him yield. "Everyone back to your business," he barked, voice cracking as he spoke. "This is a security matter. We are protecting the integrity of this establishment." But no one moved. Phones stayed raised. Cameras kept rolling. David Harper turned his phone toward a guest standing quietly nearby. "Sir, what are you seeing here?" The man didn't hesitate. "I see a woman being thrown out of a hotel she clearly belongs in," he said, his voice steady and loud enough for others to hear. Richard's face flushed red. "That's slander," he snapped, pointing a trembling finger toward Naomi. "She hasn't proven anything." But Naomi didn't need to defend herself. Instead, she turned her phone slightly outward, lifting her voice just enough to address the entire lobby. "Would anyone like proof?" David immediately responded, his voice sharp. "Show them." But Naomi didn't pull out contracts or badges. She turned calmly to Isabel Ortiz and asked, "Isabel, do you see my name in the reservation system?" Isabel didn't waver. "Yes," she replied firmly. "Naomi Brooks, penthouse suite, checked in remotely, VIP tag attached." The murmur of the crowd intensified. Naomi continued, her voice as composed as ever. "And is that VIP tag an executive-level override?" Isabel nodded again. "Yes, ma'am. Owner-level clearance?" The silence that followed was heavier than Richard Walker's denial. Richard's face contorted with fury. "That could have been faked," he snapped. "Anyone could have hacked into our system." Emily Turner's voice cut across the lobby, dripping with incredulity. "You really think someone walked off the street, hacked your system, and brought 2,000 witnesses with them?" Amanda Blake suddenly looked pale, her eyes lowering to the marble floor as realization set in. Even Brian Cooper's bravado faltered. For the first time he looked uncertain. His gaze flicked toward Richard, silently asking for guidance, but none came. Naomi turned to Brian, her tone calm but edged with steel. "You were told to steal from me, that's exactly what you did, but you had a choice." Brian opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Then another voice broke through the noise. Elena Ruiz, the quiet concierge who until now had remained hidden behind her podium, stepped forward fully, her spine straight, her face resolute. "I won't let this continue," she said loudly, her voice shaking only slightly. "I saw her name this morning. I should have said something sooner. But I'm saying it now." And that was the moment. The shift. A crowd that had begun as passive observers transformed into active participants. A woman near the check-in line whispered to the person next to her, "Is she really the owner?" Another guest replied aloud, "She's handling herself like one." Naomi looked around slowly, meeting the gaze of those who stood with her, strangers who had chosen dignity over silence. She spoke not just to Richard and his staff now, but to everyone watching. "Your time running this place unchecked is over. The words were simple, quiet, but final. Richard opened his mouth to retort, but hesitated. For the first time, he saw what everyone else already understood. This lobby no longer belonged to him. Richard Walker's mouth opened, searching for a final defense, a desperate retort, but no words came. His authority, once absolute behind that polished desk, had evaporated. Naomi Brooks remained where she was, still, composed, but with a power that now filled the room. The crowd sensed it. The shift was complete. David Harper's live stream had crossed 10,000 viewers, his voice clear as he narrated. She hasn't raised her voice once, but this is total control. Naomi lifted her phone to her ear again, her tone unchanged. Grace, she said quietly, escalate the internal system, begin full audit documentation, time-stamp everything from this moment forward. Grace Lewis's voice came through clearly. Understood. Documentation has begun. Do you want Deborah on standby? Naomi didn't hesitate. Yes. Patch her through as soon as I give the word. Richard tried one more time. Look, he said, softening his voice, his expression flickering with a false humility. This isn't personal. We're just following protocol. You should understand. Naomi met his gaze steadily. You think so? She stepped forward, slow, deliberate. The crowd parted for her without hesitation, granting her a clear path to the front desk. Amanda Blake, who had stood frozen since Isabel and the other guests formed a barrier around Naomi, took an unconscious step back. Brian Cooper's bravado had dissolved entirely. His eyes darted nervously toward the safe where Naomi's card remained locked away. But Naomi's focus never wavered. She reached the desk and placed her phone gently atop the marble counter, setting it to speaker. Grace, she said simply, prepare to initiate executive action. Standing by, Grace replied. A ripple ran through the watching guests, a sense that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Naomi turned her gaze to Brian first. Return my card, she ordered calmly. Brian hesitated, looking toward Richard for direction. Richard, his confidence rapidly unraveling, barked, You're not returning anything. She's a liar, a fraud. But Brian didn't move. Naomi's voice sharpened, still quiet but carrying weight. Brian, one last chance. Return it or accept the consequences. Brian froze. Then, against every instinct that had previously guided him, he stepped backward toward the safe. Richard's face flushed deep crimson. This isn't about you, he shouted at Naomi. You think this stunt makes you powerful. You've tricked these guests. You're manipulating them. You'll regret this when corporate finds out. Naomi tilted her head slightly. Corporate? She echoed softly. Then, without breaking eye contact, she said aloud for everyone to hear, Deborah, please join this call. A new voice entered the speaker, a woman's voice, measured and sharp. Naomi, this is Deborah Scott. I'm listening. Naomi's next words were cold steel wrapped in silk. Deborah, I am exercising my authority as CEO of Brooks International Hospitality Group to immediately terminate the following employees at the Horizon Grand Hotel for cause. She paused for one brief breath, then spoke each name with deliberate clarity. Richard Walker, Amanda Blake, Brian Cooper. Gasps echoed through the lobby. A guest near the entrance whispered, Oh my God, she really owns this place. Deborah's voice didn't waver. Understood, confirming termination and initiating lockout protocols. As she spoke, Richard's employee badge, clipped proudly to his belt all these years, buzzed twice and flashed red. Amanda's badge followed, and Brian's. Each beep was a public execution of their professional authority. Phones caught every frame. the flush draining from Amanda's face, Brian's shaking hands, Richard's jaw tightening as he realized his empire of arrogance had just crumbled in front of an audience. Naomi didn't stop there. "Deborah," she continued, "freeze their access credentials, retrieve all company property in their possession, and flag them as ineligible for rehire across all Brooks International properties, effective immediately." Deborah's voice was calm and final. "Confirmed." Then Naomi turned not to Richard, but to the guests. Her voice was soft but resonant. "I want every guest here to know this is not a spectacle, this is justice. This is accountability." The applause began softly at first, one pair of hands near the back, then another, then more, until a rolling wave of clapping filled the lobby. Not rowdy, not chaotic, but purposeful, measured, acknowledging. Richard stood behind the front desk, stripped of title, of status, of command. His face was pale, his eyes darting from Naomi to Deborah's voice still issuing quiet, efficient orders through Naomi's phone. Amanda stepped back against the wall, as though distance might protect her. Brian looked like he was about to speak, some last protest, some plea, but Naomi turned to him before he could utter a word. "You had a choice, Brian," she said gently. "You all did." Her gaze swept across all three of them. "And you failed it." At that moment, Isabel Ortiz stepped forward again, this time not as a frightened employee, but as something more. Naomi met her eyes. "Isabel," she said quietly, but for all to hear, "please, unlock the safe." Isabel didn't hesitate. She moved behind the desk, entered a new code, her own code, and opened the safe with a soft, final click. Inside lay Naomi's black card, untouched. Isabel retrieved it with both hands and placed it directly in Naomi's palm. And as Naomi closed her fingers around it, she spoke her final words to Richard Walker. "You wanted me out of this lobby, but this lobby belongs to me." The room fell completely silent. Every eye was on her. And at that moment the balance of power shifted completely and irrevocably. As Naomi Brooks stood at the center of the lobby, her black card finally restored to her hand, a hush spread through the crowd, a silence not of shock anymore, but of realization. Then, from near the lounge chairs, an elderly man in a navy blazer spoke up, his voice clear and calm but carrying years of disappointment. "I stayed here last spring. Filed a complaint about how I was treated at check-in. Never even got a response." His words unlocked something. A woman with a toddler stepped forward next, clutching her child's hand tightly. "I asked for an AD-compliant room. They told me none were available," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "But then I watched another guest check in minutes later and get one." A younger man, backpack slung over one shoulder, raised his voice. "I emailed about being double-charged last year. It took weeks for anyone to even acknowledge it, and that was only after I threatened legal action." It became a chorus, soft at first, then swelling as more guests added their voices. Each account a thread that, when woven together, revealed the pattern Naomi had suspected all along. This wasn't a single moment of misconduct. It was a culture, a rut, a system that had quietly alienated and excluded guests for years, hidden beneath polite smiles and polished service language. Amanda Blake's expression shifted from stunned silence to creeping horror, as she realized the accusations were piling not just on Richard, but on the entire front desk staff, including herself. Brian Cooper took a small step backward, his face pale and tight, as if hoping the floor itself might swallow him. But Naomi's gaze remained steady. Her phone, still on speaker, crackled as Deborah Scott's voice returned. "Naomi, we've begun pulling the past 18 months of guest feedback logs from Horizon Grand. Preliminary review already shows significant irregularities in complaint resolution signed off by Richard Walker. A sharp breath of vindication swept through the lobby. Naomi nodded slowly, her voice clear. Then we correct this today. She turned to Isabel Ortiz, who, though standing at Naomi's side only moments ago as a concierge, now carried herself with the weight of something more. Isabel, Naomi said firmly but warmly, effective immediately, you are promoted to acting general manager of the Horizon Grand. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed almost instantly by a smattering of applause. Isabel's eyes widened, a hand instinctively rising to her chest. Ma'am? Thank you. Naomi's reply was simple. You spoke up when it mattered. She turned back to the guests, addressing them directly, not as an abstract audience, but as individuals who had borne silent witness, or worse, silent suffering. I want every single one of you who experienced poor treatment here to know this isn't just about one incident today. This is about a failure that went unaddressed for far too long, Naomi said. Her tone was neither apologetic nor defensive, it was resolute. The Horizon Grand promises inclusion, but promises mean nothing if they're not upheld. That changes now. She gestured to Isabel. From this moment forward, all pending complaints will be reviewed by Isabel and me personally. If you were ignored, dismissed, or mistreated, we will reach out to you directly, within 48 hours. A quiet but powerful murmur of approval swept through the guests. David Harper, still live streaming, spoke into his camera. This isn't just an apology, this is a CEO making real-time reforms in front of everyone. Even Emily Turner lowered her phone for a moment, genuinely moved. She's doing exactly what we always say companies should do, she whispered. Not hiding behind PR statements, fixing it here, now. Naomi turned to Isabel again. Suspend all current front desk reservations until further notice. VIP guests will be handled personally. All other guests will be redirected to our downtown partner property with a complimentary night's stay and transportation arranged immediately. Isabel's voice, now steady and sure, rang out. Understood. Then Naomi gave her final order for the day, one that struck at the heart of what she was building. Retrain every member of this staff, no exceptions, front desk, concierge, management, starting within 72 hours. And all new training will be conducted by an independent third-party firm specializing in equity, dignity, and guest relations. She turned to Deborah, whose voice was still audible to everyone. Deborah, inform corporate. The reform starts here and spreads everywhere. The Reverend tried. Confirmed, Deborah replied without hesitation. As Naomi looked around the lobby, at the gathered guests, at Isabel now confidently moving to begin her duties, at Richard, Amanda, and Brian shrinking smaller and smaller behind the desk, it was clear that this day would not fade quietly into memory. It was already becoming something more. A turning point, a reckoning, and most of all, the beginning of a transformation. The applause still echoed softly in the lobby as Naomi Brooks lowered her phone from the speaker mode. For a brief moment, the tension seemed to ease. But deep inside, she knew this was far from over. Then her phone vibrated gently, a discreet alert from Deborah Scott. Naomi glanced down at the notification. Preliminary audit results from Horizon Grand complaint logs, irregularities confirmed, suspicion of regional leadership involvement, request escalation authority. Her jaw tightened. The rot went deeper than Richard Walker's arrogance. She had suspected it, but now the evidence was emerging in real time. She tapped her earpiece. Deborah, she said quietly. Who else is implicated? Deborah's voice dropped in volume but carried a sharp precision that only Naomi could hear now. We've identified communication threads between Richard and former regional director John Mitchell. Patterns suggest a long-standing unofficial directive. Prioritize preferred profiles for premium accommodations. Naomi froze. John Mitchell. A name she knew well. A man who had retired just 3 months prior under a cloud of vague HR violations that no one seemed interested in unpacking at the time. So this wasn't just Richard's prejudice. It was systemic. An entire informal culture cultivated and protected by leadership. Deborah continued, "We've also flagged several complaints over the past 2 years at other Horizon properties. The same signatures, same dismissive responses. Mitchell was approving resolutions without investigation." Naomi's mind sharpened, the edges of memory cutting through. The preferred profile language. It had never appeared in an official document, but she had heard whispers of it. A quiet bias masquerading as brand image protection. A system hiding behind professionalism. She turned slowly to Isabel Ortiz, who was already speaking gently to guests near the check-in line, offering sincere apologies and personal assistance. "Isabel," Naomi called out softly. Isabel turned immediately. "Yes, Ms. Brooks?" "Come stand beside me," Naomi said. Then she lifted her head, scanning the entire lobby, not just at the guests but at the staff who remained. Housekeepers, bellhops, junior clerks. Many of them stood frozen in place, some clearly afraid, others confused. Naomi addressed them all, her voice clear and calm but unmistakably authoritative. "This wasn't just Richard Walker. What you all witnessed here today is not an isolated incident. It's a symptom of a culture that tolerated silence and sometimes rewarded it." A ripple of unease ran through the room. Naomi's gaze swept to the cameras still rolling. David Harper's live stream was approaching 15,000 viewers. Emily Turner was now posting clips faster than anyone could comment on them. "Let me be clear," Naomi continued. "The failure here was not just one man's arrogance or one team's misconduct. It was a structure that allowed it to persist. A failure that goes all the way to regional leadership." She raised her phone deliberately. "Deborah," she said aloud now for the entire lobby to hear, "effective immediately, authorize a company-wide review of all guest relations practices at every Horizon property nationwide." A collective gasp rose from the staff. Naomi's voice didn't waver. "Every complaint filed in the past 24 months is to be audited. Every dismissed concern reopened. Every staff record reevaluated." Deborah's voice came through like a steady drumbeat. "Understood. I'm preparing the directive now. Regional compliance will be notified before end of day. Full transparency." Naomi turned back to the guests. "This wasn't just about me," she said. "This is about every guest who ever walked into a Horizon hotel and was judged before they were welcomed, interrogated before they were served." Her eyes softened, but only slightly. "That era ends today." Then came the most surprising voice yet. From behind the concierge podium, an older bellhop with graying hair stepped forward. He cleared his throat nervously. "Ma'am," he said, almost shyly, "I worked here 20 years. I saw this pattern too. I was told it was just how things were done." His admission hung in the air like a confession and a release. Naomi met his gaze without anger. "Thank you for saying that," she said gently. "It's hard to speak the truth after carrying silence for so long." Several other staff members exchanged glances, then nodded slowly. The tide was turning, not just among guests, but inside her own team. David Harper, still live streaming, leaned slightly toward his phone. "She's not just cleaning house here," he said, narrating the moment with reverence. "She's taking on the whole system." Emily Turner wiped at the corner of her eye. This is history, she whispered to herself. In that moment, Naomi knew this wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was a reckoning not only for the Horizon Grand, but for every property carrying her company's name. And the public was witnessing it in real time. With Deborah Scott's confirmation ringing in her ear and the cameras still rolling, Naomi spoke her final words for this day. Let this be known. Horizon isn't just changing policies. We're changing the culture. From the ground up, and the applause that followed was no longer polite acknowledgement. It was a declaration. They stood with her. The reckoning was no longer just hers to lead. The lobby of the Horizon Grand, once a symbol of exclusion and quiet prejudice, now felt different. Not because the marble floors gleamed any brighter, or because the chandeliers sparkled with extra polish, but because the very air seemed to carry a promise. Naomi Brooks stood at the center of this transformation, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering. Isabel Ortiz stood by her side not as the quiet concierge she had been that morning, but as the newly minted acting general manager. Around them, staff members who had once blended into the wallpaper now stepped forward cautiously, some offering quiet nods of respect, others simply standing straighter, no longer sure where they fit in this new chapter, but knowing something fundamental had shifted. Naomi raised her phone once more, her words deliberate and clear. Deborah, she said calmly, effective immediately, suspend standard operations at the Horizon Grand for 72 hours. We will not reopen this property until every member of this staff has completed comprehensive retraining in dignity, inclusion, and accountability. Deborah Scott's response was crisp and unwavering, confirmed. The directive is being drafted now. A quiet murmur moved through the guests, but this time it wasn't discontent. It was approval. Relief. Naomi addressed them directly. For all of you who plan to stay here today, we will accommodate you at our partner property downtown, at no cost to you. Transportation has already been arranged. And for those willing, we will provide a dedicated line for feedback on what you experienced today. Your voices will help us rebuild this place the way it should have always been. Her tone softened just slightly as she added, You were all witnesses today not just to misconduct, but to the opportunity to set things right. And I intend to honor that. Applause rose again, gentle but insistent. Near the concierge desk, Emily Turner lowered her phone briefly, her eyes shining. She's doing it, she whispered to David Harper. This isn't just talk. David nodded slowly, still filming. She's rewriting the entire script live. And then, something extraordinary happened. One by one, the guests who had just watched the reckoning unfold began to offer their help. A man in a suit approached Isabel. Can I help direct people to the shuttle vans outside? A young woman carrying a stroller spoke up. I can stay and help answer questions for confused guests. Even the elderly man who had first spoken about his unresolved complaint tipped his hat to Naomi. Thank you for not just apologizing, he said quietly. Thank you for acting. Naomi inclined her head toward him, genuine warmth in her expression. I've walked away too many times in the past, she said softly. But not today. And not ever again. Her phone chimed softly, a message from Grace Lewis. Media outlets nationwide picking up the live streams. Public sentiment overwhelmingly supportive. The Horizon Grand story is going viral without hashtags. Naomi smiled faintly. Good. Let it spread. Let the world see what accountability could look like when it wasn't packaged as a press release. And yet, even as the moment felt victorious, Naomi knew this was just the beginning. Deborah's earlier revelations still echoed in her mind, John Mitchell's quiet directives, the pervasive culture of bias that stretched beyond this one hotel. It wasn't over. It was expanding. She turned once more to Isabel. Within 30 days, Naomi instructed quietly but firmly, you and I will visit every property in the Horizon portfolio. No advance notice. No staged tours. Real inspections. Real listening. Isabel nodded, her face set with determination. Yes, Ms. Brooks. Naomi's gaze swept the lobby one last time, her eyes meeting those of housekeepers, bellmen, guests, and even the junior clerks who had been too afraid to speak earlier. Her voice softened not in volume but in purpose. "This place is not just a hotel," she said, speaking both to them and to herself. "It's a promise. And starting today, that promise belongs to every guest, every time." Then she turned toward the portrait wall near the front desk, a blank space waiting to be filled. Naomi walked over, removed a framed corporate slogan that had hung there for years, "Luxury is our standard," and placed it carefully on the floor. In its place, she gestured to Isabel. "Have this space prepared," she said. "We're going to hang something new." "What should we put there?" Isabel asked. Naomi smiled, a smile not of triumph but of resolve. "A statement," she said. "Simple but absolute. This space belongs to every guest, no exceptions." A ripple of emotion moved through the room. It was more than a slogan. It was a declaration. David Harper, still live streaming, spoke directly into his camera. "You're watching history happen, not because a CEO gave a speech, but because she took action." And as the applause rose again, this time louder, fuller, infused with hope, rather than shock, Naomi Brooks felt something inside her settle. For years she had been tested. For years she had endured quiet humiliations that no one had noticed or remembered. But today would not be forgotten. As she turned back to Isabel, she spoke a final instruction: issue a message to every guest who was ever ignored, dismissed, or profiled here. Invite them back. Personally. On us. Isabel smiled, her eyes glassy with emotion. "I'll make sure of it." Naomi nodded gently. And with that, she stepped forward out of the shadow of indignity, into the light of leadership. Her final words to the gathered crowd lingered long after she left the lobby. Hospitality doesn't begin with the smile you offer. It begins with the respect you assume. And the Horizon Grand Hotel, at last, began to live up to its name.